Hi guys, cinematic recap here. Before we start, warning. Spoilers ahead. Today, I'm gonna explain a European science fiction and drama movie, called Re-Alive. In 2084, Elizabeth arrives at a company running a secret project called Lazarus to resurrect the dead. While walking around the company, she meets the project leader, Dr. Victor, who explains all the processes they are going to do soon. Elizabeth eventually agrees with all the instructions given by him. She is also in charge of taking care of their first subject after the subject is revived later. After that, the movie moves to 2015, where a man named Mark suffers from throat cancer. The doctor informs him that he only has a year to live, despite all the available treatments. Mark is shocked to hear this because he has been living a healthy lifestyle. At that time, Mark is an accomplished artist with a design firm under his wing. He starts to prepare everything for when he passes away, starting with his business, his assets, and telling those closest to him about his disease. Later, Mark decides to spend the rest of his days with his girlfriend, Naomi. One night, Naomi arranges a dinner party with all of Mark's friends to please him, but Mark still cannot enjoy the party. At one point, he suddenly gets up and goes inside his house to take his tablet. He then returns to his friends and points an article to them, which shows that some scientists have created a bioartificial organ for a dead rat. Hoping that the invention could be applied to humans in the near future, Mark plans to have his body frozen in cryostasis. Hearing this, most of his friends agree with his decision, but not for Naomi and his little brother. Naomi is dissatisfied as she thinks that the future scientists only want to use him as guinea pigs for science. Mark calmly explains that he will not be doing any more chemotherapy because he already saw his father dying during his treatments fighting his disease. After spending a beautiful moment with his girlfriend for the last time, Mark finally commits suicide in order to be cryopreserved, with Naomi by his side. Back to the present day, Mark is finally resurrected under Project Lazarus after Victor and the other doctors manage to transfer him into a new artificial body. He becomes the first man to be resuscitated from cryonics. The doctors quickly ask him what he feels at the moment. At the same time, Mark has to adapt with his new body because he cannot move his body freely, just like a newborn baby. Not only that, he also wears a device that looks like an umbilical cord on his abdomen, through which food can be supplied to him. Since then, Mark starts doing therapy regularly, such as using his legs to walk, and also learns how to move his fingers. One day, he is given a device called Mind Reader, which can restore his past memories. However, the device makes him long for his past life, even though he feels alive with his new body. At night, he gets out of his bed and is shocked to see his old face in the mirror. Because of this, he falls to the floor and feels that his new body has a lot of imperfections. Fortunately, Elizabeth comes at the right time to save him. The next morning, Mark asks Victor if he will live in such a vulnerable and fragile state forever. Victor replies that he still has to depend on the machine to live, but he will be able to disconnect from it for greater periods of time. Several months later, Mark is able to move his body normally, but is still not allowed to leave his room because his lungs have not adapted properly. Elizabeth approaches him from behind, and all the doctors surprise Mark to celebrate 100 days of his new life. After that, he is also given an old box containing some of his old belongings. Seeing this, Mark starts recalling his old memories, especially after finding a letter written by Naomi. Just as he is about to start reading it, Elizabeth comes to his room and helps him read the letter. When Naomi was 50 years old, she decided to freeze herself in cryostasis because she also had a terminal disease. Knowing this, Mark asks Victor to take him to the cryostasis chamber where Naomi's body has been stored. He then requests the doctors to resurrect Naomi like they just did to him, but Victor explains that resurrecting someone from the dead is very risky, and that precise calculations are needed for the process to be successful. With that uncertainty, Mark becomes more saddened after seeing some of his old photos with Naomi in the past. Sometime later, he sees Elizabeth in the laboratory and asks her about the experiences previous to his reanimation. He is sure that they have gone through a very long process to get to this stage, but Elizabeth would not give a clear answer because of her initial agreement with the company. From then on, the doctors have observed Mark's altering behavior. Elizabeth suggests them to let Mark see the outside world, so he might forget Naomi for a while. However, the doctors disagree because it is too risky to let him out. That night, Mark sneaks out of his room and manages to steal Victor's key. He unlocks Victor's room and finds his mind reader. After he uses the device, Mark begins to see all Victor's memories of all the experiments he has done so far. Before successfully resurrecting Mark, it turns out that most of Victor's experiments ended in dire failures. Many experimental subjects died shortly after being resurrected. A few moments later, Victor finally reveals Mark to the public as the success of his experiment. He also announces that Naomi will be the second human being ever resurrected. However, Mark does not seem happy with the announcement as he starts to find bad things about the Lazarus Project. Afterwards, Mark confronts Victor about the deaths of the experimental subjects. Victor says that he always remembers those people all the time. He also memorizes their names, and those failures have always haunted him to this day. He even lost his family when they found out about the project. However, Victor was ready to take those risks until he could bring Mark back to life. He eventually asks Mark to work together for the success of this project. Unfortunately, Mark still does not believe him and thinks that he has no sense of humanity. He quickly approaches Naomi's cryostasis chamber and hugs it. At that moment, he is very afraid that the horrific experiment would happen to his past girlfriend. On the other hand, Elizabeth comes to Mark's room and realizes that he has disappeared. She then comes to the cryostasis room and finds him sitting on the floor. Mark tells her about his fears that might happen to Naomi. At that point, he finally realizes that he is unable to cope with his new life, and feels that all the beautiful things before his death were enough. Before committing suicide in the past, he did not expect his future life to end like this. Therefore, Mark chooses not to continue his second life. He then asks Elizabeth to help him kill himself by informing him of poison to stop his heartbeat. He hopes that the Lazarus Project can stop running after his second death. Hearing this, Elizabeth immediately bursts into tears, indicating that she has loved Mark all this time. Obviously, she does not want to help him at first, but she ends up helping him when she realizes that Mark cannot live with his current condition. After Mark returns to his room, Elizabeth comes there and immediately embraces him. They share a heartbreaking moment one last time before Elizabeth tells him the name of the poison. Not long after that, Mark quickly heads to the laboratory and looks for the poison. He manages to find the poison and stares at it, remembering a similar incident in his past when he wanted to end his life by drinking poison. After drinking it, he stumbles back to Naomi's cryostasis chamber and disconnects its system so that Naomi cannot be resurrected. The movie ends with Mark dying for the second time in front of Naomi's cryostasis chamber, realizing that a second life is something he does not want to have. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.